Hi, everyone. If you're just joining, we're just going to give a few moments for folks to sign in, to join the Zoom link, and we'll be with you. We'll be with you shortly here. Hopefully everyone's having a good day. I don't know whether, I think Larissa's in, well, she'll tell you where she is, but she's in the western part of the country. Mario's in the eastern part of the country. We had Remy Rodden do sort of a sing-along yesterday for Take Me Outside Day. He's up in Beaver Creek in Yukon Territory, and he was just saying that a few days ago they had 25 centimeters of snow, and I think it was minus 27 or something. Anyways, winter came early for them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just some logistics here, and then we'll get started. Okay. Some people might come a little bit in the next few minutes, but we'll get started here. Welcome everyone. My name's Colin. I'm part of the Take Me Outside team. Really excited that you could join us today. Take Me Outside is a nonprofit organization committed to really trying to get teachers and students to spend more time outside, to really advocate for learning outside, and to have that be a regular part of every student's day. I'm coming to you today from Treaty 7 territory and Banff National Park in Alberta. If the chat function is open, if you want to put into the chat function where your class is coming from today, that would be great. It'd be great to see where everyone's coming from. Charlotte, who's helping us today on the back end, she's put a little link there if you want to look up what territory you're coming from. But really excited to have you join us today. And yesterday, I was just telling Mario and Larissa, this week yesterday was the 12th annual Take Me Outside Day. Yesterday we had approximately 250,000 students and teachers across Canada and the US, and I think some teachers and students from other parts of the world as well participate in Take Me Outside Day. They committed to going outside for 1 hour. And it doesn't seem like much because I think you'll hear today that both our guests really enjoy spending time outside themselves. But this was really sort of an awareness raiser to help really advocate for the time that we spend outside. So we've had different events throughout this week. We've had Indigenous Knowledge Keepers join us on Monday. We've had Canadian Olympic athletes join us on Tuesday. Yesterday, we had singer and songwriter Remy Rodden. We had author Richard Louv. Today, I'm excited to speak to both our guests, Larissa and Mario. Tomorrow, we have an Indigenous storyteller, Cecilia, joining us. So we've had a week-long events, which are all being recorded. So if for some reason your class isn't able to join us live, we'll send an email and those recordings will be available to you and your class. Really excited to introduce both speakers that we have today. We're just going to sort of frame this as a conversation, and I think there's a lot of interesting things to talk about. I'm going to introduce Larissa first. Larissa Crawford proudly passes on Métis and Jamaican ancestry to her daughter Zaira, and is a published Indigenous and anti-racism researcher, policy advisor, and restorative circle keeper with over 14 years of experience. Larissa is the founder of Future Ancestors Services, a youth-led professional services social enterprise that operates at the intersection of climate change and racial justice. In 2021, Larissa was named Women of Influence Top 25 list and York University's Top 30 under 30 alumni. So Larissa, welcome. I'll ask you a question in a second here, but I also want to introduce Mario. Mario Rigby was born in Turks and Caicos Island and spent his childhood in Germany before moving to Toronto. He has always had a tremendous drive to push the limits in athletics, exploration, and anything else he puts his mind to. In his early days, he competed in track and field on a national level. And in 2018, Mario completed his Crossing Africa journey, a 2-year trek walking and kayaking from Cape Town, South Africa to Cairo, Egypt. His goal was to inspire people locally and globally to get outside, which really ties into the message Take Me Outside has as well. Mario is an advocate for inclusion and diversity in the outdoors and encourages people to explore the outdoors through sustainable forms of travel. I think we're going to talk a little bit about this today as well, but Mario just finished a cross-country journey driving an electric vehicle throughout Canada to help promote sustainable travel. It's great to have you with us, Mario. I think, you know, we get these sort of scripted bios, but I want to give both of you a chance just to introduce yourselves a little bit as well to students, maybe tell them sort of what things you're working on now, what are you passionate about, but maybe just your own intro in your own words. And Larissa, maybe we'll start with you.
Okay, thank you so much, Colin. Danse, Larissa Crawford Dishne Caution, Calgary Nukan, Pimi Femi, Penitengwishin, Pi Jamaica Nuikan. Bonjour, bon matin tout le monde. Je m'appelle Larissa Crawford, je suis à Calgary. J'ai une ascendance métisse de Penitengwishin et une ascendance afro-caribéenne de Jamaïque. Je sais que cette conversation va être en anglais, mais si vous voulez faire des questions en français, des commentaires en français, s'il vous plaît, faites-le. Hey, I'm Larissa Crawford. I'm calling in from Treaty 7 territory, Calgary right now. This is definitely home to me. I carry Métis ancestry from Penetangwishene and Afro-Caribbean ancestry from Jamaica. Pass this ancestry on to my 5-year-old daughter, Zara. She's in grade 1 right now. I think it's always important for me to acknowledge that I carry a slave master name, Crawford. My ancestors who were stolen from Africa, especially Western Africa, and brought to Jamaica only a couple generations ago, were branded by their slave master, John Innes Crawford, who's a Scottish man who came to Jamaica and owned one of the biggest plantations on the island. And so my last name, Crawford, was a symbol of his ownership over my ancestors. Now, I really think about things like this. I think about my family history. I think about how what's happened before shapes our realities today. What actions and inactions took place, and how is that shaping how we relate to one another, how we relate to Earth today. So yeah, my work is exciting. I really love my work, but I also really love being outside. When I was younger, I grew up in a trailer park. I grew up on food bank, and we lived in poverty, but that gave me the opportunity to always be outside. I didn't go to kindergarten. I didn't go to preschool. I was always outside. And as I grew up, outdoor spaces ended up being the place where I could be my full self, where I was navigating anti-Black racism and anti-Indigenous racism in school. My peers were not safe people to show my full self with. And so the outdoors became a place where I could honor my full self, where I could connect with my ancestors and stories of the people I belong to. And this is where outdoor sports like rock climbing, ice climbing, hiking, canoeing, skiing, snowshoeing, these are more than hobbies to me. This is really an extension of self and the way I relate to Earth. And this informs my commitment to her well-being, because I recognize we're all in relationship with Earth and we benefit so much from her gifts. And so much of the work that I do and that I might talk about today is a reflection of honoring that relationship that we have and being committed to Earth's well-being, because we recognize that that's an extension of ourselves. That's an extension of our own well-being, and Earth is deserving of that as well. So that's a bit about me. But again, I'll talk more about kind of the work that I do as we have our conversation today. But this is where I'm coming from to contribute to this conversation.
Thanks, Larissa. Yeah, really excited to dive in to some questions for you. But Mario, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, sort of what you're working on right now, some of the things that you've done? I think some of the students would be really interested to, I know it would be hard to say in a couple minutes, but even to direct them maybe about this trek across Africa you did, as well as the drive across Canada, but maybe just telling us a little bit more about yourself and some of the things that you're passionate about these days.
Yeah, sure. Larissa, that's a beautiful opening introduction of yourself. So, thank you for that. I would say that, I come from a background very much like Larissa in Jamaica, where, my last name, Rigby, also comes from slave owners in the Turks and Caicos Islands. And, that's a reality that, we all had to kind of grapple with. We still are. And the way that I'm addressing it is through expeditions. And, being raised in Germany, it's like a complete opposite culture of the Turks and Caicos Islands, the Caribbean, and, this kind of like German upbringing really it gave me a perspective of life that is plastic. So I'm able to blend in and change and morph into whatever the environment is asking of me. And, a long time ago, actually, this is a funny story, but a long time ago, me and my brother, we used to watch this show called Black Panther. It's a TV show. And it's the same Black Panther as the movie that came out for Marvel. However, there was this episode in which where T'Challa, the king of Wakanda, before he went on a walk, he actually decided to, do a walkabout around Africa before he became the king. And, that really like resonated with me. It sat with me for a long time. I'm like thinking, well, if someone like a superhero who looks like me is doing something this incredible, and that's how he becomes a leader, I kept thinking like, wow, that's a beautiful story. But then one day I thought to myself, well, why don't I just become that story? Why don't I just go on this walk? I mean, it sounds as simple as like saying, why don't I just go on this walk? But that was the 2.5 years of my life that, completely changed my perspective, and may have changed other people's perspective. But it really, a lot of people think that when I did this trek that it was one of the most dangerous things in the world. Yes, but it actually made me more alive than I've ever been.
Thanks, Mario. Yeah, and I think maybe that leads into sort of a follow-up question, and maybe we'll go back to you, Mario, of just, it's clear for both of you that the time spent outside is sort of plays a major role in your life. Could you speak to maybe how some of that 2 years of trekking and kayaking across Africa, like how has that shaped who you've become?
Being able to witness indigenous tribes, being able, like I did a TEDx talk in Sudan, and by the time I've arrived in Sudan, I've probably encountered over 100 different tribes, and it was really unique experience. And I don't think enough of us get to experience that, really, especially when you see tribes from around the world. It was really in Malawi where I began to like think deeply about sustainability and what's happening with climate, change, climate action, the climate crisis. I was never really into it before. I was just oblivious to what's happening around the world. I wasn't really an outdoor person prior to going to Africa. Actually, in 2015, I was a city boy. You know, I used to laugh at people who go hiking. I'm like, haha, look at your high socks and huge backpack. You know, I never got it. I was just like, what are you guys doing? What are you guys doing? Um, and then, you know, I did this track and I had to learn everything on the spot. I learned everything. I learned how to survive in some of the harshest conditions. I learned how to be on my own for 2.5 weeks across deserts where you're running out of water, through jungles, monsoon seasons, malaria, you name it, everything you could possibly imagine, getting shot at by rebel soldiers in Mozambique. So those are things I had to learn on the spot to survive. But Malawi was really the place because, you know, according to the to the World Bank, Malawi is considered the poorest country in the world. And and it's very evident when you arrive there, you know, people are suffering. And because of the people that were suffering there, and because I'm walking, you know, I could never say that I'm suffering as much as they are, but I tasted a bit of that. I wasn't able to eat the food that I was required to eat, so I lost a lot of weight there, just because of the access to food. It was just an access to food issue. It had nothing to do with how much money. If I had $1 million, I still wouldn't be able to eat. It's just that having access to those kinds of food sources that weren't available, and then seeing trees just cleared out for miles, hundreds of miles everywhere. And that's because of the exasperated climate, warming of the climate, that's drying out all the agriculture. And what they do instead is they're creating this kind of food in which you require more boiling water. That means more firewood. So it exasperates the whole process of their they're basically suffering from climate change. And so when I saw that, I thought to myself, like, wow, these people have contributed almost 0% of carbon emissions into the atmosphere, and we're the ones who are responsible for it. And and we tell, those people that we hate, you need to step up, you need to do the sustainable projects. But then I'm thinking to myself, back in my own country, why are we not doing that?
Yeah, thanks, Mario. Yeah, lots to, I think, dive into more. Larissa, for you, like, just can you share some of how those early outdoor experiences, maybe in childhood, but even sort of the adult experiences of rock climbing and kayaking, how that has sort of helped shape who you've become and committed to the work that you're doing? Oh, sorry, you're on mute, Larissa.
Rookie mistake. Um, yeah, Mario, I really enjoyed just like listening to that journey and your process of realization and of learning. I think that's like explaining that part is what I usually take away most from these kind of speeches and panels. So thank you, Mario. And like I think about, again, my earliest experiences. Earth was definitely positioned as a recluse. It was definitely positioned, and like in my life, it was, again, that space where I could be most connected to myself and those around me, human and non-human. When I think about kind of my journey to getting back to that, because there was a long time where I prioritized international travel and volunteer work throughout Asia and South America, especially. And so I'd gone through between about grade 11 to like the first year of my university. I was really focused on going on all these trips, going to all these places, because I was studying in social studies. This idea of extreme poverty, this idea of colonization and what that was, and why we see inequities around the world. So I was studying that, and I was reflecting on, okay, well, what does that mean for me? And so when I was 16, I started a fundraiser in Lethbridge, and I was able to start a library in in Ghana in Pandai district at Let Us Grow School Academy, and we brought books and school supplies there, and we really lived on the land during that time that we were there and volunteering. And it was, I definitely went through this process of understanding, okay, I love the connection to access to land. And I'm loving this work, this humanitarian work and reallocation of resources. It's like, yes, this is what I want to do. And that really propelled me or catalyzed me into a journey of doing this kind of work around the world. And after having lived in Istanbul for a year and having worked with refugees and again, very close to the land and our natural spaces, I took a step back after coming back from my second year of university in Istanbul. And I said, well, why am I glorifying all of this work around the world? Like, why do I feel like this work is so much more important than the work I could be doing at home? And two, I had to be really critical. Like, was I the best person to do all of that volunteering? Was I the best person to be fulfilling those roles? And I got really honest with myself. And I do feel like I ended up getting caught up in the excitement of traveling, the excitement of going to new lands and meeting different Indigenous peoples around the world. But I started to lose a sense of self. And when you lose a sense of self, or when you don't have a clear understanding of who are and the peoples you belong to, you are especially at risk of appropriating little pieces of everyone's culture. And by the end, you don't really recognize who you are. And that's what I found I experienced right before going into my third year of university. And so this is something I wish I could have been more conscious of when I was in school. And so this is why I'm sharing this. But I took a step back and I asked, well, what are the most fundamental values that I carry? And what are my identities and what are they tied to? And when I started asking that in this process of feeling very lost and just down on myself for not knowing what I want to do and where I want to do it, going back to this question and exploring my ancestry and exploring, again, my childhood traumas and experiences and how that's shaped me today, really just thinking and talking about that and spending time writing out in journals, doing these mind maps, whatever the case, got me to a place where I could recognize, oh, like connection to land and her well-being has consistently been a value that's very important to me in my life. And I haven't necessarily aligned that with what I study or what I'm doing for work or what I'm volunteering in. Because it was always this kind of part of my life, but I didn't think about how that could actually shape these other aspects of my life. Yes, I had always gone to protests. Yes, I had always kind of engaged in ceremonies and arts. But at this time, in recognizing, oh, this is a really core part of my identity. Oh, my health, especially my mental health, is very tied to my access to nature. Oh, maybe I should make more space for this in my education and the volunteer work that I do. And so when I figured that out and when I started pouring more of my opportunities into exploring relationship to Earth and climate change and how we got here, the more holistically healthy I've felt. The more I've been connected to my spiritual, mental, emotional, physical well-being. And I have several chronic pain disabilities, and I've been recovering from a pretty severe brain bleed for the past couple of years. So this has especially been so pivotal in my abilities to exist the way I want to, but then also healing and access to nature and going outside and being with the land and understanding how are we seeing climate change manifest around, especially what is currently Canada. There are so many communities that are affected right now, especially when you go up north. And that's where a lot of my learning about the modern contemporary examples and experiences of climate change come from. But again, this has all come back to acknowledging how my relationship to earth is tied to my relationship to self, my relationship to health. So it's changed me completely. And again, it's held more space for rest, for healing in ways that make doing what I love doing sustainable, impactful, but then also sustainable, where I can do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah, thanks, Larissa. I think for me, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think it's, I think from a student perspective, we have a lot of students watching today, various ages, of course, but I guess I'm wondering, and this will be a question for both of you, but maybe Larissa, I'll go back to you. Like, what does it mean to be an activist? And for you, and then for students, like why is it important to maybe sort of try and pursue some type of activism around specifically environmental and climate change? Why is that so important in an activist role?
Okay, I'm going to have 3 points for this one. First point, um, we need to understand the history of activism, the history of climate justice activism, the history of environmental movements. Because one thing that I see in a lot of young activists is almost an ego that they think that they're the first to do what we're doing. And the reality is we aren't. A lot of people before us have done so much work to get us to this place where it's more mainstream to talk about, it's more popular to talk about climate change and environmentalism. But we're only here because activists, scholars, artists, lawyers have put in the work and have approached these issues in innovative ways before. So we have a responsibility, especially as young activists, to hold space to acknowledge that we aren't the first to be doing this, and to hold space to learn from the past and to come to this activism acknowledging the responsibility we have to understanding its history. So that can look like Googling, that can look like getting out cool books from the library on the topic. That can look like following Instagram accounts and social media accounts that really explore the movement and history of the movement. But we have a responsibility to understanding the historical context, what's happened before in these movements. The second part is a really great way to do that is by making sure you're working intergenerationally. So you're working with older people, you're working with younger people, you're working with seniors, you're involving many generations of knowledge. Because this is something else I often see in young activist spaces is a resistance to acknowledging the value that older people have. Now, this might seem a little contrary because there's so many spaces where they're bringing in youth councils and youth groups. And yes, that's important, but when you're leading your activism, when you're leading an organization, it's really important that we bring in elders, that we bring in people who've been doing this work for 20 years. Sometimes we're going to learn from them that, oh, that's actually what we want to make sure we don't do. And there's a respectful way to do that. But there is also, again, so much valuable knowledge beyond the limited experiences that we have. And in the process of doing so, I want you to also understand that your lived experience as a youth is qualification to contribute to climate change planning and climate justice work and sustainability work. Because you are young, you are qualified to have a say. Because you are young, you are qualified to lead projects. But that doesn't mean that we can't just ignore older people and elders and what they can teach us. And then finally, you know what? I had 3 points, and part of this brain bleed has affected a lot of my memory. But with regards to activism, yeah, making sure it's intergenerational and making sure we're acknowledging the history and making sure that we are doing this responsibly, that we acknowledge that we aren't the first to do this. These are two really big points that I would love to see more young activists embrace. And then, oh, I remember my last point. My last point is that you don't have to be everything to everyone. It is not healthy to try to be everything to everyone. I do my work at a systems level. I do my work by changing policy that influences our government. I do my work at a systems level, and I love bringing research to life through policy and education around that policy, through programming and education around that programming. So that's what I love to do, and that's my channel of activism that I'm really good at. Now, I do some art as activism. I do make ribbon skirts, and I use that as a channel to talk about activism. And I do some individual level stuff, but I also recognize I want to do one channel of activism really, really, really well. And so I don't want you to feel like you have to go and organize all the protests and sit on the student councils and do this and do that and do that. Choose what aligns with your experience, what aligns with what's fun to you, what you like to do. And it's okay to change as you go through this learning journey, but don't try to do everything for everyone, because that isn't going to be able to last for very long. That's when you're going to get burnt out. And so I know it can be, like, I still go to protests, I still support other channels, but I really invest myself in something I'm really good at. And that's what I hope y'all leave with, is an understanding that you can be really good at a channel of activism, and you don't need to be everything to everyone all the time. So those are my 3 points for young activists.
Thanks, Larissa. Yeah, definitely good advice to give. Mario, do you want to build on that? I mean, I think that's a fairly comprehensive answer from Larissa, but I think just what activism means to you, and I think, yeah, why is it important for students listening to consider pursuing activism, especially around environmentalism, climate change? Why is that so important right now?
Like, for me personally, I think it's exciting. I think it's exciting to be part of something that is trying to be part of something that is for the perceived greater good. As human beings, we are limited. We can't see the future. But we have a lot of very talented people that can put things together, that can build the future. I would say that I wouldn't call myself an activist, but I do things that sometimes activists would do, and sometimes they call upon me to join them together to do things. Like, as an example, I've worked with scientists who work in the poles, in the Arctic poles, and they research how old the ice has been, where climate change is going, and what kind of climate change has existed in the past. And so my job would be to, like, kind of lead them to these expeditions to take them out, whether it's like climbing mountains or traversing deserts, or traversing deserts in the poles. They exist there as well. So, to me, I think that if you're thinking about activism, I think that's a very holistic thing to get into. I think you have to look at literally every single corner: political, scientific, social, media, you name it. We all have to come together. There have been no drastic changes in humanity with just one person, with one idea, with one ideal. I think it's collectively all of us. We need storytellers to tell what's happening, the problems that are happening. We need storytellers to share the information that scientists have found and be able to translate that in a way that that people can take as, this is important for me. Like, going back to Malawi as well, it's one thing to just, like, have Malawi suffering that way. But at the end of the day, do enough of us care And so you need people to create documentaries, movies, films, but you also need people who are political leaders. One time I hung out with a guy. What was he? He was he was with the Irish embassy in Malawi, and I had a coffee with him one time, and I learned a lot about how money gets transferred from first world nations to developing nations like Malawi. And he said, for the life of me, no matter how hard I try, although I am responsible for the transference of money, I don't see where 85% of that money goes. It just disappears. And and I remember that it's like almost like haunting what he said to me. And he said, Mario, if you want to make immediate drastic changes right now, influence the top. And so that's the question, how, and of course you need everyone to be able to influence the top, because people at top political places, they come from normal households. I could be speaking to someone right now who could be a political leader in the future, could probably be prime minister. And so my job is to, verify information as best as possible and share that with you in a way that you can be passionate about.
Yeah, thanks. It's Larissa, do you want to just jump in quickly here?
Yeah, no, I love everything that Mario has been saying, especially underscoring how important it is to approach this holistically and to consider like social, political, economic aspects. And just to like maybe underscore this, how I like to understand and use a holistic approach is like the difference between climate justice and climate action. I like to understand, and this is what's helped me, but I like to understand climate action as a tool. So whether that's a campaign or a program or a club or a donation collection, these are all tools. But oftentimes, what we end up doing is we end up positioning like that program and the fulfillment of that program as a success itself. And we plan, and all we focus on is getting this campaign out or getting this club set up and doing whatever activities our club is doing. But when we only think about those limited kind of approaches and those limited tools, we may not be considering how politically or how socially effective these actions can actually be. So when I think of climate justice, I think of that referring to a more holistic approach to climate action, where we use climate action as a way to create new relationships, as a way to address root causes of climate change. But it's one tool that we use within our broader understanding of the history of residential schools in Canada, and how that actually is a climate issue. Land theft, who has access to the outdoors and who doesn't. Urban planning, so our bus system. All of these inform people's access to contributing to climate change, their impact on climate change, and their abilities to get support in navigating the impacts of that climate change. And so when we approach climate justice with understanding that we need to look at many different parts of our lives in the past and in the present, it helps us make sure that we're doing work that is more sustainable, that is more ethical, and that is going to be more effective. And that climate action is one of those tools within a more holistic approach. So that's one way that that's helped me make sure that I'm taking that more holistic approach in my activism. And I find that it's really helped a lot of the clients and youth groups that we've worked with as well.
Thanks, Larissa. Yeah, I think for for students especially, like I think for adults as well, but for students, it can feel like talking about climate change, talking about environmental issues comes with like a lot of heaviness. There can be this doom and gloom messaging that they hear on a daily basis, that we all hear on a daily basis. I think, a question for both of you, what gives you a sense of hope for the environment? And is that something students can latch on to? Where do you find a sense of hope?
Yeah, if you don't mind me, I'll take this one first. Um, the thing is, I mean, if I feel like sometimes when we talk about climate change, we think environmentally, but it's also social. There are people who are suffering. There are animals who are suffering, plants that suffer. And so, as Larissa was saying, like holistically speaking, it's everything. It's literally everything, because we have to survive on Earth. We need a planet that has clean oxygen and agriculture for us to grow foods. And a lot of indigenous communities, they actually look 5-7 generations ahead of themselves. We are probably one of the few generations ever that have existed in human history that have only thought about our own generation. And we can see the problems that lie with that. But in terms of hope, I think that don't look at the problem as like you can solve it today. It's not a problem we're going to solve right now. We have to look at it as a lineage that goes on 5 generations into the future. And I think the more you think about that, I think the more work you're willing to put in, and also the more people you're willing to bring in, because it requires other people to come together, to network, to do, when the ancient pyramids were built, it wasn't just like one generation, it was like multiple generations that these pyramids were built. And they were able to do that successfully because they've worked together, they've collaborated, they had a vision in which they all shared. How do we get this vision? How do we get people to share this vision that the Earth is more important than material commodity? And so whatever it is that you do, doesn't matter if you're an engineer, police officer, whatever you do, it's incredibly important for the rest of humanity. And I think if we start thinking in that sense, like really globally, then I think we have a better sense of global community where we can tackle the issue of climate change. A lot of the work that I do, I do exaggerated stuff, like expeditions where, I can't just like cross the lakes. I have to traverse the entire length of it. I have to traverse part of the Caribbean islands using only human powered energy, and to be the first person to ever do so. And the reason I do that is not because I'm an adrenaline junkie. I'm not an adrenaline junkie at all. I am a very calm person. I have peace, and some people call it suffering, but I call it meditation. But the reason I do it is because I push myself to the limit. Because initially, when I went to Africa, when I decided to go to Africa, I was at a crossroad. It was either I'm gonna continue living a life in which I find no value in, and that to me was death, or I can find love, I can find something passionate, I can find something that opens my heart and I'm willing to fight for. And so I decided to go on that. But I needed to go to this extreme level in order for me to get away from my old life. And I'm not asking people to walk across Africa or anything like that at all. But my exaggerated expeditions hopefully will inspire people to one day look and say, you know what? Maybe I want to do that, I wanted to be an artist my whole life. Maybe I will pick up the guitar or whatever and become this artist. My job is, one, A, is to survive the expeditions, and two is to inspire people to learn about the world, to be curious. Don't lose that curiosity. Young folks, do not lose that curiosity. That is the most important thing, and that is the most human thing that you have. And I think that if you hold on to that, no matter what it is, nobody can tell you that what you're doing is not the right thing. Because if you feel it in your heart, you feel really like, wow, this is like my calling, then that's the thing you need to do. And the reason that's the thing you need to do is because you're willing to do whatever you can to make sure that you take it to the next level. So in that sense, I have a lot of hope. I think we'll come around. Humans have always come around. We've gone through so much in the last 115,000 years of, human history that we know of. So I think we're gonna make it through this. I think I'm very hopeful. I'm actually even more hopeful for the planet. The planet has gone through even way more. It's us that we need to worry about. We're killing ourselves. It's not the planet. The planet has gone through different species of animals that have ruled and roamed the earth. It's ourselves in which we are destroying, and our fellow creatures.
Thanks, Mario. Yeah, it's very inspiring to hear some of those words, and I think to be able to find sort of that sense of hope in different ways. I think in the work that you're doing, hopefully we can find a sense of hope. Larissa, do you want to build on that? Where do you find a sense of hope in some of this work?
It's so funny because in my notes to make sure I didn't forget, that's Mario, what you just ended on is exactly how I was planning to start. My hope, I the Earth is resilient. My hope isn't about the Earth in that way, because the Earth will still exist if we are not here. So my sense of hope has to be for humanity. It has to be for people, and the ways that we relate as part of ecosystems, not separate from ecosystems. And in settler colonial culture, like in dominant kind of ways of thinking of the way that we relate to Earth, we often talk about humans as not being within a natural ecosystem. And so we don't think about our actions and inactions and how that affects other people within our ecosystems. And so many indigenous worldviews around the world that I've come to appreciate and interact with have that acknowledgement that we are in relationship with our non-human kin, with the animals, with the plants, with Earth. We are in a reciprocal relationship. We impact them and they impact us. And so my hope is for more people to bring this understanding of relationship to how we regard Earth and her well-being. And this is very deeply tied to one being and understanding the effects of climate change now and what they look like. That can come from traveling, but that can also come from the kinds of books you read, the kind of people you follow on social media. But building our awareness of what does it look like right now, I think gives you more capacity for hope. And I know that sounds counterintuitive. It's like knowing more of the problem, how does that give you hope? But to me it does, because these are all opportunities for change. These are all opportunities to address human action and human behavior. And going outside, being outside and appreciating all of the gifts we experience and benefit from nature. My daughter, her grade 1 class, at her school, they do a coolie walk once a month. And so they go outside and they have their classes outside. And so they'll do math, or they'll do science, or they'll do art, they'll do different classes outside. and they bring in Blackfoot elders especially, to sit with these children and to support them in shaping a worldview that centers a relationship to earth, shapes the way that they think about land and water and all that makes earth, in a way that we are in relationship with it. And so she always asks, Mommy, I want to do art with Mother Earth. And she always says Mother Earth. It's the cutest thing. But I'm seeing how time outside and bringing her on hikes. Her first hike was a very difficult one when she was like 8 months old. And then actually when she was 2 days old, I took her out on a hike. She's always been around nature. She's always been in nature. She's always appreciated everything that she gets from the earth. And we talk about that a lot. And it's so exciting to see her, to see how this shapes her identity, to see how this shapes what she cares about, the questions that she asks. And that to me is hopeful. Like, that gives me hope, because I'm seeing this happen daily through my work, where time spent outside, time outside, not just being a hobby, but being a space where you really appreciate how much we rely on our relationship with Earth to exist, to enjoy the best things of life. To me, understanding this and more people understanding this gives me a lot of hope. And I recognize that not everyone has equal access to getting outside. Not everyone has sometimes it's really hard. You don't have a car or money to get out there. Sometimes we face racism when we're out there. Sometimes we don't feel safe when we're out there. So there are a lot of reasons why we can't all go outside all the time. But there are ways that we can honor our relationship to Earth in our classrooms, in our rooms. And that involves really reflecting on what that relationship is. It can involve planning imaginary dream trips and adding a whole bunch of outdoor excursions and studying the history of different places and the climate change status of these different places. That's a really cool activity that I like to do. And talking about it with your friends and watching nature documentaries. These are all different ways that we can honor our relationship to Earth while not accessing it. And all of this is building our capacity to be more effective climate change activists, but also just to be more mindful humans. And I want to acknowledge that this is coming from a place of Indigenous knowledge. And I really want us to acknowledge that, to value that we've had this science and we've had this way of life for time immemorial, for forever. And we've been told that this is wrong. We've been told in a lot of very different and very violent ways that the way that we relate to Earth is not right. And so I think as we understand this for ourselves, we also need to acknowledge how important it is to listen to Indigenous peoples and to really see the value in our worldviews and our ways of being, because this is, again, such a source of hope for me. So I'll stop there, but I do have a lot of hope. Sometimes it's hard, but that is definitely like a driving catalyst for why I'm able to do my work.
Thanks, Larissa. It's funny how, like, when you're really engaged in a conversation, time just seems to speed up immensely. You both, I can't express how inspiring both of your words are. It's this is great. I'm going to stop with my questions. We've got some student questions. If students or teachers there's a few questions in the Q&A. If you want to add your questions now, please feel free. We are running out of time, but Mario and Larissa, I think, yeah, just a couple questions here to start off with. Maybe Mario, for you, there was a question from Ruby Estrada, Santa Fe Public School. I think it's amazing you were able to experience firsthand the poverty in other countries and the privileges we take for granted. Now that you see the importance of being all-terrain ready, did you learn how to forage for your own food and water?
Yeah, so that's funny. I learned that immediately in South Africa. South Africa is the first country I traversed. And the way I did all of that was, when you're in a life or death situation, you exponentially learn everything very quickly. So the 2.5 years that I learned all that I need to learn might have taken me maybe 10, 15, 20 years if I weren't in those situations. Like foraging along the coast for prawns, I would actually find like onion nets, and I would use that and then wake up in the morning and you have luxurious breakfast. Or picking up snails off of rocks. Local people would tell me usually what is good to eat, what is not. So what I've done is really go to places and, learning to engage with local people, particularly if they're tribal or indigenous, is I think one of the most important skills and tools that you can have is how to communicate with those people in a way that they can help you. My trip to Africa was not me helping them, it was them helping me, really. And I learned a lot from that. And so that's how I really learned about foraging was the will to survive and being able to approach local people in those areas, and they would teach me their ways. And you only have one chance to learn. If you mess it up the second time, you might not make it. So I had to get it right the first time.
Great, thanks, Mario. And there's another question here from Madame Fuiz, grade 7-8, Bell High School. Larissa, I'll ask you this one. Why is it that governments are so reluctant to actually address the necessary changes needed to mitigate climate change, especially those in positions that can? Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Fouillez. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I likely mispronounced your name. But yeah, this is the whole. This is a root cause of climate change, really. And I'm gonna try to make this as simple as possible because it is very complex. But when we think of why Canada was created in the first place, where we saw primarily British and French peoples come to settle Canada, where they were creating colonies with the intention of keeping people here and controlling the lands and Indigenous peoples here. And when we think about the transatlantic slave trade, where Indigenous people were stolen and brought to these stolen lands here, when we think about why all of this happened, it comes down to resource extraction. It comes down to finding and exploiting what we find in the earth. And for the purpose of making more money, for the purpose of profit. And so when we think about why Canada was created in the first place, why our government was created in the first place, the government was created as a way to control Indigenous people and as a way to control and make legitimate the stealing of land and the control of land here for the purpose of taking the natural resources and making money from that. And they used stolen Indigenous people to take those resources. And they moved Indigenous people around so that they could continue to take those resources. That interest is still in existence today. That interest didn't just go away. That is the interest and that we've seen our government born from. Now, I know at the beginning I mentioned we work with every federal ministry. We also work with every provincial ministry and several international contexts. And it makes sense that they're resistant to this. It makes sense because it's going directly against the initial purpose of creating government, especially in Canada, in the first place. So most simply put, that's what I can share. But I will share our Instagram account for Future Ancestor Services, because we regularly share information that helps us understand this a lot better. And so I can also share, in response to your question, a link to our Instagram page, which has so much more information about exactly this history.
Thanks, Larissa. And I know both Larissa and Mario have other things that they need to get to, but I'm going to ask them both one more question, and that's just sort of any final words that you'd want to pass on to students, in particular listening today. Is there any sort of final message, any final words of encouragement or inspiration that you can just briefly give to students watching today? Mario, you wanna? Yeah.
You know, have courage. This is a tough time. You've been brought up in a time where you need to have more courage than we ever needed. And I'm actually excited for you for that. I'm not scared for you. I'm not worried for you. I'm excited for you, because that's what builds character. That's what builds stories. History will be written about you guys in ways that, you know, will hopefully make you look like heroes. But I think that what I do, the reason I do it is, you know, as I mentioned before, it is to encourage people to step up above and beyond of what they think is capable, because we are way more capable of doing anything that you're already doing. There's always a little bit more room to do more, and you will be hurt. People might even, you know, be hurt in front of you, but that's okay. You got to keep moving. If you're looking at it from not just one generation, but many generations ahead, that pain is shared amongst all those different generations. That gives you the strength to move on, to keep fighting. Don't stop. Just like how I walked Africa. Don't stop. Keep moving, one step at a time. That's literally how I did it. It's the perfect metaphor for fighting the fight. So keep doing that.
Thanks, Mario. And Larissa?
Yeah, and I'm going to try to address a question here. Students are wondering if you felt you were activists as young people. If you weren't environmentally focused, would you have other activist passions? If I'm to leave you with one thing, I think this question also summarizes a couple of other questions. I first knew I was an environmental activist when I was working at Winners when I was like in grade 11 or 10. And they were throwing out bags and bags and bags and bags of plastic every day into the garbage. And I asked, well, why aren't we recycling this? Oh, because the recycling bin's on the other side of the mall. And that was a day I felt I was radicalized, because I could recycle an entire year what they throw out in plastic in one day. And to me, that was very frustrating. And so I did feel like and there's a question about schools' carbon footprints and making them better. I don't have a specific answer to making a carbon footprint better, but what I will caution is that oftentimes the issue of climate change is individualized as a way to not focus on the bigger companies, the bigger sources and contributors to climate change. And so while we want to make sure we're doing individual actions, we also want to acknowledge that there are a lot of limitations to just focusing on what we're doing, and that we need to acknowledge that it has to do with other organizations and businesses and governments as well. And then secondly, and if you weren't environmentally focused, would you have other activist passions? Every movement, every activist movement has something to do with the environment. So I don't want you to think that you are pigeonholed into one kind of activism because you focus on sustainability. Alternatively, I think that we all need to explore how environmental health and well-being is relevant to all of our activist pursuits, to all the movements, because it is. And the better we're able to understand that, the more effective we can be in our climate justice and environmental work. So those are the 2 points I'll leave with, and I hope that I've been able to address a couple of the questions that we weren't able to get to today.
Thanks, Larissa. If you're a school and you're able to hang on, we do have some prizes to give away in a couple minutes here. But I really do just want to thank Larissa and Mario again for their time today. Such inspiring and encouraging words, I think, for all of us to hear. I think we've put some of their Instagram handles and social media handles in the chat. So if you want to reach out to them, please do. But we're going to let Larissa and Mario go now, but and then we'll do some prizes. But thanks so much for joining us today, and hopefully you two enjoy the rest of the day. Take care. And we've got, we just want to thank some of our partners quickly before we give some prizes away. We want to thank the Outdoor Learning Store for their support throughout Take Me Outside Day and this week. The Outdoor Learning Store offers supplies, resources, and workshops for teachers to help get their students outside. Charlotte will put their link, she has put their link in the chat. We also want to thank MEC for their support. They support us in the work that we do across the country. So we want to thank MEC for their support today as well. Okay, for prizes, for those that are left, we have let's see here. We have some support. We're gonna give away a Green Teacher Magazine subscription, and that is gonna go to, this is gonna go to one of the teachers and classes that asked the question, Madame Fuiz in 7-8 Bell High School. Madame Fuiz, you are the winner of a Green Teacher subscription. Congratulations. And then we also have a copy of Walking Curriculum book by Jillian Judson to give away. And we are going to choose Miss Parsons' class. Miss Parsons, you are the winner of that walking curriculum. I think Charlotte is putting in the chat here. You can reach out to us at info@takemeoutside.ca just to remind us that we need to send you your prize. We also have a Water Rangers compact freshwater testing kit to give away today. And that is going to go to, sorry, I'm just looking through here, Sarah Henry. Sarah, if you're still on the call, Sarah Henry, you have won a Water Rangers compact freshwater testing kit. And lastly, we have OceanWise, a free virtual lesson of your choice for your class. OceanWise is a great organization, obviously focused on our oceans, and that is going to go today to Sunaina Rani. Sunaina, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, Sunaina Rani. Sunaina, if you're still here, you have won that prize, a free virtual lesson of your choice from OceanWise. Okay, I think those are all the prizes. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you have a great time outside, that you were able to participate in Take Me Outside Day yesterday. We have more events planned tomorrow, and we'll send a follow-up email. But thanks for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.